Saaghe Fogwe Podcast. Elevate your life, empowering insights for growth, success, and fulfillment.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Saaghe Fogwe Podcast. I appreciate all of you who are watching right now. Welcome. If you're just joining, get a comfortable seat, grab a book, grab a pen, get some water, because it's going to be hot today. First of all, I want to apologize for the late start. I do want to shout out to my producer. He is not feeling well, but he's here. He's dedicated and committed, and he's here to make sure that we have a show today. So if you're saying a prayer over your turkey tomorrow, also say a prayer for him because he's not feeling the best, but he's still committed to be here, and he is here. So today will be a wonderful show. We are speaking about bringing the African perspective to a Western culture or Western experience, however you want to word it. And I have a young man who's going to be here to share some wisdom. I mean, they usually say the wise, the older you get, the wiser you are. You can see what a young man can't see from a rooftop. But we have a young one who has an old soul. He is a young man with an old soul. He is wise beyond his years. And I'm very privileged and honored to have him on the show today. He is Mr. Ishmael Asabango. I'm going to welcome you to the stage. All right,
Hey.
there you are.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. I had to
Thank
add
you.
that
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
there.
Thank
This
you.
is the one time I get to call you Mr.
I appreciate it.
So use
Very
your
much.
one joker, your joker. Welcome. It's an honor to have you here. I know we've talked about having you on the show, and we finally made it happen. What a perfect time to do it. Thanksgiving week, we're thanking, God, we're thanking, whatever people, however
Yeah.
people celebrate Thanksgiving. People have
That's right.
different ways of celebrating, but we're always thankful. We're thankful every day. We make every day a Thanksgiving.
That's right.
But I'm glad you're here.
Thank
And
you.
before we go into the show, I don't want to introduce you yet. I don't want you to start talking till we share the link. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you so that before we go into it, let me send it your way so you can also
with you so that
okay.
before we go into it,
Okay. All right. Okay, guys, if you're just joining, please try to share, invite people to the show today, because this will be a good one. Okay, I shared with you, and I'm gonna share with a couple of people here who've been waiting anxiously. Okay. I'm sure people are busy cooking, and some are in the grocery store watching, preparing for Thanksgiving tomorrow. But you can multitask. So do that and watch this show, because it's going to be a hot one today. It will be good. All right. A couple more shares and then we're good to go. And don't eat too much tomorrow, guys, because you have to work double hard to get it off. All right. I think we are good. All right. Ishmael,
Yes, Auntie.
you're on the hot spots.
Tell me about it. Well, it's good to be here, by the way. Thank you for having me on your show.
No problem. So before we go into our topic today, we want to know who you are. I know who you are. We've known you for years, seen you grow up.
Yes, that
We'll
is true.
talk about that as we go along, but tell people who Ishmael is, your background, where you come from. Just give us some insight into your life, who you are, so that we know. We want to see the journey where you're coming from and then where you are right now. So just give me some background. Give us some background on who you are.
All right. Thank you. So, hello everyone. It's really great to be on the show. And again, kudos to my Auntie Saaghe for bringing me on her show. So, my name is Ishmael Asabangu. You can call me Ish or Ish the Fish. I always like to throw that in because I like it. Um, I'm originally from Bamenda. I am an Abakwa boy. So, I'm originally from Bamenda in Cameroon, from West Africa. I grew up in a single parent home, single mom, and she raised me and three other boys. So, it's a single mom of four boys. I went to public school and then I eventually went to boarding school, PSS Mancon. I grew up in Cameroon. And while in Cameroon as well, and after high school, I did the ACCA program, the Chartered Accountancy program. And then eventually I immigrated to the United States, and where I did my bachelor's in business administration in accounting, and then went on to do my master's in negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building. And just for fun, I'm calling Sai auntie because she's actually my auntie, and she's actually my favorite auntie. So I call her Coolest. That's her nickname, Coolest. So that's just basic background about me. And so, but I'm sure she'll be asking me a bunch more questions, which I can answer to give you more background.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So give us a little bit more insight into growing up in a single parent home, because we come from a background where the family is made up of there are different structures, right? Two parent home, single mother. For this auntie of mine, I admire her a lot because she's a strong strong woman to raise four boys, and and she's still standing, she's still strong, still, and be able to go through that. So give us an insight into what a single parent home that you grew up in was like. Just give us an insight.
Okay. By the way, my mom, I'm on Cecilia. I just call her, I call her by her nickname, Masisi. She's actually my hero. So my family, I like to talk of my family as being the matrix. So you will think of my family as both polyandrous and polygamous in nature. So my mom was, got left at the altar 3 times. So I have 4 brothers. We all have our dads. But then my dad has many wives. So it's like a polygamous family. So I call my family a matrix because for me growing up, the idea of family, I didn't even know what family was. I didn't even know what that looked like. And so when my mom decided to step away from that life, step away from my dad, step away from the dads of these other guys, and decided to just put us through school, she decided, you know what, I'm going to put my feet down. I'm going to find a way to just make things happen for my boys and for myself. So my mom and I and my 3 brothers, we began by selling puff puff on the road. I don't know if you guys know what those are, but think of it as American donuts. We began by selling puff puff on the side of the road. So I was one of those boys who used to run to the bus stops to sell stuff. I used to sell peanut and spices that my grandma used to make. And my mom and all of us, we stayed in a 1-bedroom house, all of us. And that's what she did. And then eventually someone opened the door for her to study secretariat work. And then eventually she ended up in the Department of Treasury in Cameroon. But besides that, she had a side business, and that was selling on the side of the road, farming, and then she began doing a little bit of work in finance and in the credit card business. And so that evolved into a multi-million-dollar business. And as a result of that, she decided to send both me and my elder brothers to the best possible schools that she could send us to. So that's why I say she's one of my heroes. And even up to this day, she is undimmed in her passion, man. She's very young. She's fired up, and she wants to do way much more. And so that's kind of how we grew up. So it was a tough house. She needed to rule the house with, you can think of a house like being under the Iron Curtain, because she needed, for 4 boys, man, she needed to do whatever was necessary to keep us in line. She was tough. In fact, my mother's nickname because she succeeded in a male-dominated traditional society, my mother's nickname to this day is the Iron Lady. That's her nickname. She's very well respected among the men, amongst her peers, and in our community. There's no place you can go to and say Ma Sisi without anyone knowing who she is. So that's what it looked like growing up.
That's amazing. I mean, it's really admirable to to see the results of such such a structure. And I wasn't planning to really go into much of this, but I think it's very important for people to understand where you're coming from, to see that growth, to see that path, to see what you went through. You still have a smile on your face. You always have a smile on your face. I don't know if I've ever seen you really frustrated and mad. Even in frustration, he's still smiling. And even when I'm mad at him, I can't get mad at him because he has a smile on his face. I can't even yell at him because he's just that person. But to come out of of that firm background, and his mom didn't only rule in his house. She'll go to the next household and come and discipline you guys. She came over to our house and things were not the way they're supposed to be. You got in trouble with her too. So the Iron Lady didn't only end with her 4 boys. Everybody in her way, you'll get in trouble if you need to. But that is part of the African perspective that we're talking about.
Yes.
We come to a different culture where you get in trouble for disciplining your child. You get in trouble for putting your child on the right path. CPS will be called on you because you gave your child a whooping or you yelled at them. So I really wanted him to give that background just so that we have some perspective. We see how some of these things, these perspectives that we come with here, they're not necessarily a bad thing. Because sometimes yes, there's some things about our background that can be detrimental to the culture we're in, but some of the perspective that we're bringing with us is very rich. It's rich to a point where it actually cultivates us into better human beings, into stronger human beings. It grounds you. It helps you in your workplace. It helps you in school, the community, and all that. But we'll go into that. Before we do, just give us more. You started talking about your education. Talk about your journey from Cameroon to here. How did you end up here? How did that come about? You ending up in the U.S.
Okay. So I went to PSS Mancon, and in Africa in general, and in Cameroon, it's the same thing where there's generally 5 professions to pick from. You either become an engineer, an accountant, a lawyer, a teacher, or a civil servant.
Doctor.
Well, unfortunately for me, I just think outside the box like that. I just hate to be put in a box, even if I know I'm supposed to be in the box. I just want to have the option of knowing that I can be outside the box. So growing up at my grandmother's feet, and I have to start there. And she's of late now, but I have to start there because that's actually where my journey in terms of traveling to this country and doing the things I'm doing right now actually began. Growing up at her feet, I saw my grandma counseling people, families, and communities towards wholeness, health, and prosperity. And I always heard her adventure. She always told me her story. So I received a gift from my grandma of insight and particularly understanding. I just had this uncanny way of understanding things to the very logistical and nuanced possible level. So like her, I kind of felt like I had the calling as well to be able to impact people's lives, families, and communities. So how do you find a major that actually captures all of these things? So I really wasn't sure. But then when I graduated high school, I actually wanted to travel the world. So I wanted to find something that could help me travel the world because I like people. So I started doing the ACCA program, accounting. But then my journey to the States was more of a spiritual one than it was a personal one, or one of seeking after greener pastures. I had just become a Christian, or actually maybe a few years after just becoming Christian, and coming from a lifestyle and a community of midnight prayers. I had been praying, and I felt God put on my heart and say, leave everything behind, pack up your things, and you're going to your new country. I have some work for you to do. Now, mind you, I was 17. I was teaching accounting already. I was top 10 percentile in the world for accounting. I was running my mom's multi-million-dollar business. I was driving a car, and that's a big deal for where we come from in Africa. I had long-term plans. I mean, I was doing great. So when that came along, I really was resistant to the thought. But I thought, well, if God is saying it, let's see what happens. And then immediately after that, my mom's boyfriend at the time, just out of the blue, said, hey, we think you need to go to America. And we think you need to go and study. You're too young. You're too young to be signing contracts. You're too young to be doing the things you're doing. You need to go and experience life. They didn't know it was in line with the calling that God has spoken to me. And then my mom jumped on that ship and then decided to just sponsor my trip to America. So that's where that's how that trip actually began. Now, in between, there were delays. Usually there's delays in that. And those delays were, in my opinion, more spiritual than they were technical or natural, because again, it's tied to a calling. But then the first time when I went to get my visa, of course, I was denied. And there's a huge story behind that one that I captured in my book, or we'll probably talk about later. But then the second time when I went, it was a breeze. I got whatever it is I needed. So it was a tough journey, but it wasn't too much of a challenge as opposed to where I'm at now and the journey I had to go through to be where I'm at now. So that's eventually that's how I actually came to the United States. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's probably what you asked, right? So
yes, about how, because I'm trying to build that journey, right? From the background you got here, and then you had already decided on a major, right? So talk about the school, schooling and all that. Let's get, because I'm wanting to get to the books that you wrote, the perspective of the African perspective that we're bringing here, but the education piece. Let's talk about your education.
So with respect to the major, I picked my major because I was already doing accounting. So I decided to come over here and continue with my accounting studies. But the reason I first and foremost pick accounting is because I realized that if you want to understand people, you need to understand their money. Money drives everybody. The things we do is because of money. It's for profit. We come to the West because we want to succeed, we want to make money. So I wanted to understand how money works. So I decided to study accounting to get an analytical understanding and the intricacies of how money works. But not just that, I wanted to understand how money works within a family setting, a community setting, and a country setting. Because since I've been young, I've always nursed the idea of being an impact player in the continent of Africa. So I wanted to also understand the continent as well. How is money impacting our people? So that's why when I came over here, I decided to choose and continue with accounting. I think I may have been encouraged to do nursing, but again, I'm out of the box thinker, and I was like, no, everyone is doing nursing. Who else is doing accounting? I know, Auntie, you're doing accounting, but I'm like, there's not a lot of us doing finance. Someone needs to set the pace. Someone needs to be an example for the people who are coming on behind us, So I decided to stick it out and do accounting and understand and do finance. So that's that journey. And then I'll just share the journey. There's a story in between before I get to my master's, but I'll just share the journey with my master's as well. Besides understanding accounting, I wanted to understand people. We can understand each other interpersonally, person to person, but I wanted to understand what that looks like, being able to talk to and influence a family, a community, or maybe potentially a continent, Africa. So I decided to pursue a master's in negotiation, conflict resolution, and then peace building. So those are the two reasons why I picked these majors. It wasn't with respect to what do I want to do in future. It was with what majors can I do to gain a certain level of specific skills that can help me succeed in whatever it is I want to do. There was no specific major for it, but there were majors that could help give me the skills that I was looking for. So that's why I chose those majors.
Amazing. For a young man to be thinking about changing the community, changing the continent of Africa. Back in the day, they'll say I had big. It's like when you're eating with adults and you go and send your fingers to grab the meats or the biggest meat, they say I've had big.
My
So
grandma
that's
used
what
to say
they'll
that all
say.
the time. Oh yeah, my
But
grandma said that all
no,
the
but
time.
coming from the background, that background of, of being grounded, disciplined. I mean, you had no choice, but success was not an option. It was
Yeah,
not optional for you.
yes.
You had to find a way to get through that. So let's talk about your books. You've written
Okay.
some books, right? And I'm sure your major, kind of influence that. How did you even come up with the topics? I know one of them, the one boys,
For boys in men's bodies,
yeah, for
overcoming
boys in men's body. Yeah, it
then
had something
overcoming this, yeah, overcoming the struggles of growing up without a father.
without a father. Talk about the books. Yeah, start with that one.
Okay, so the book for boys in men's bodies, overcoming the struggles of growing up without a father. I again, growing up in a single parent home was in my opinion was kind of a blessing, just being mentored and discipled by my own mother. But as a man not growing up without a father, it is very challenging. I mean, fatherlessness today is a social problem. It's like, I mean, everywhere you go, you hear of daddy issues, right? And so both for the men and the women, but more so for the men. So I personally had to overcome a lot of the challenges of growing up without a dad because there were certain things that I needed to have learned as a man early on in my life that I did not know. And so the book, the idea is, how do you know what you should know but not really know? Because no one could actually teach me that. So I had been for the longest part of my life, I had been trying to resolve the daddy issues in my own life, from abandonment issues to what is a man, what does it look like to be a man, what does it look like to think like a man. And then I was trying to address some of these issues from a spiritual point of view, mental, relational, financial, and a physical point of view, also using my faith as an anchor as well. But the idea of the book actually came while I was living in California about 3 years ago. I was walking Venice Beach. So I was walking the beach, just thinking, and just thinking about boys, just thinking about African men, just thinking about my brothers, thinking about the challenges that we've all gone through. And it came as a thought, and I believe was God speaking to me. He said, this is what I heard in my heart. You need to write a book for my sons and call it For Boys in Men's Bodies. And then when that happened, I just had this vision of a catalog of chapters that I needed to write about, which was addressing the spiritual aspects of people's lives, mental, relational, physical. And this was based on a model that I had created to help my own self transform. Because what I believe is transformation can veto any background you come from. If you engage in personal development and transformation, you can veto any background you come from. So when I saw that, I just went immediately back home and I wrote the introduction, which was based on a blooper, and then tied it to my upbringing, and then started writing the book. And so that's where the idea really came from. And the goal was, we tend to hear from politicians to businessmen to people who do personal development and webinars and masterminds. Everyone is talking about the fatherlessness issue. We need to solve it. We need to solve it. We need to solve it. What I've hardly seen is, how do we solve it? What I've hardly seen is, how do we help someone who has been involved or who has daddy issues overcome those daddy issues personally, and then be empowered to do the same for other people and do the same for their communities. So that's where I was coming from, not just as someone who's concerned about the issue, but as someone who is one of those people who have those issues and who has, to some extent, made some strides in overcoming the issues. So that's why I actually wrote the book, and that's the inspiration for the book.
That's awesome. I mean, for someone who has gone through this, and the amazing thing is, you and I have never really gone into this topic. So I'm sitting here looking at my little brother, whom we've talked about everything, but this topic has never, I mean, it comes up, like we brush by it, but we've never really, like really talked deeply about that, because I've never looked at it at anything differently. We grew up together. We grew up, the community basically, took part in the raising, and, in one way or another. So I've really looked at that perspective, and I haven't read this book yet. So I need to, I'm definitely, I know I still have to read this book. But I really want people to see the importance of somebody going through something, being a part of something, and not just wanting everybody else to experience it on their own, but wanting to share that experience with other young people so that they can either um, avoid going through the same path or going through the same motions, but have some guidance. If
Yes.
I'm understanding it right, this is the goal of the book, to make
Yeah, that's
young
it's
men don't go through the same thing that you went through.
yeah. So pretty much the people who are actually have been most impacted by the book, besides the people who have gone through the same issues, are actually people who grew up with fathers but have father issues, and people who are currently married and are thinking of becoming parents, who actually read the book, and some of the comments I've had were, "Wow, Ishmael, I never really thought I was gonna be able to get anything from the book. I was reading this book from my brother who was abandoned by my dad, but I found out that I needed it and I needed to
Mhm,
grow in the same things that you grew
mhm,
up in." And yes, the reason I was writing the book is not just for men only, but I focused on men because we tend to face the issues of we tend to face and carry a lot of the daddy issues with us throughout our lives. It affects us way more than it affects the women, because women generally have good role models in general. For us, especially in the Black community, especially even in the African community, unfortunately, we don't have really good role models. People who can show us the road, people can show us the way. And in
mhm.
addition to that, coming from a traditional community, from an African community with generally a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset, it's a challenge. It's really a challenge. And then it's just been so normalized that if you've gone through these issues, this is just life. Well, life can be bigger than that. So what can we do about it? So I wrote the book to help people who have gone through these issues, from young adults to young professionals to people who are married or not, to just help them see that, hey, I'm one of you. I've been through it. This is what I did to get me out of it, and this is what I'm doing to still get me out of it, and this is where it's gotten me too. And this is what, and then I also include resources in it with stories to share how I overcame certain things, so that when you see the resources, you see, oh, wait a minute, he's not just talking about this stuff. He's actually read wide about it, found solutions to it, and he's actually sharing it with me, so I can actually learn something from it to be able to overcome my own issues as well. Because there's so much for us to do, and we can't just keep getting stuck in the past. There's just too much for us to do as Africans.
And how do you think this has helped you in your Western experience? Like, coming from, because that's your African experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your background.
Yeah.
That that's a background that could break anybody. It could break you to to be this zombie who's just walking around. You're depressed. You're
Yeah.
sad. You're mad at the world. You just want to kick a child on the way because just because they were born. But
Yeah, that's
instead of
true.
doing that, you have decided to empower yourself, and and use it. And you're a life coach too. You coach young men, as from what I understand. But let's talk about how this background has influenced you, how you're bringing it to the Western culture, and how it has helped you.
Well, unfortunately, today men are on the menu. From different social communities try to put down men, kick down men, and say men are useless, men are not needed today. I think it's becoming an increasing challenge in the Western community, unfortunately. Whereas that was what was really foundational in transforming the American or the Western experience. Men being men, and men being leaders in their homes, in their communities, and also in their lives. So initially coming to the West, it really didn't hit me, because the thing with fatherlessness issues is, when you're young, when you're a teenager, it's affecting you, but you really don't know. You're really not in touch with it. It's really not fully affecting you yet. However, when you hit that young adult age, when you turn 21, 22, 23, and you're now thinking about life, marriage, purpose, you immediately recognize the void in between. So initially when I came, it wasn't much of a thing, because coming from the background I was coming from, and just being fired up about my calling, I was just focused on, I'm just gonna do some great things for myself, my family, my community, the African nation. But when I hit 21, 22, 23, 24, it really hit me. That's when it really hit me, and it became a challenge. One of the examples I like to use is when there was a time when I think I should have been married already, and you actually told me, I think you remember that moment. Should we introduce this lady to the family as the person you should marry? And it was the right thing to do, but I immediately got afraid. That's the first time that it really hit me hard, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is becoming a real thing. I don't know what to do. I've never seen this before. I don't know what it looks like. I just was trying to find a way to escape it. And I did escape it. And it was a big loss for me, but I escaped it. So that was the first time that it hit me. But that allowed me to start living. That allowed me to, because of my course, start traveling. And I lived with different kinds of families. I lived with Japanese families, American families, European families, Chinese families, Filipino families, Spanish families, English families. I lived with families with 12 kids, no kids, families near divorce, families with thriving marriages. And then I had people who I was learning from. But however, that idea of coming from Africa, knowing where I came from, having that African identity implanted in me, helped me through that process. Because even though I kept seeing these families, these American and Japanese and other families thriving, and I long to be a part of those families because I'm like, this is what family looks like. I want to be a part of them. I realized that there's no other family like your own. And even if someone brings you into your family, you're still not really a part of that family. There's no other family like your own, and you really cannot run away from your family. Because when it comes down to your family and your community and your people, you love your family, you fight for your family, you fight with your family, but family is still family. And even though I can go ahead and do life, just me, myself, and I, at the end of the day, there's no better way to do life than me and you against the world. So just remembering that I come from a community-based culture, a heritage of royalty, which is the African people. I was like, okay, this is something I need to maintain, but then do my research, learn and incorporate the good things about fatherhood, parenthood, and manhood from these other communities that have made them thrive. I need to incorporate that back into our culture and then dispense the insight so that everyone can learn and we can become the better people, doing well in our families and our communities as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, it really is, because there are people who are ashamed of where they come from and they don't want to identify, or we move to a Western culture, which there's nothing wrong with, there are pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want to preserve the African perspective or the African culture that we come from. And some people are completely ashamed of it. Either you don't want to show where you're coming from, or
and I can speak to that too, by the way.
Yeah. So and I'll let you speak to that. And then you have those. So speak to people who are ashamed of their African heritage, and then also to those who have kids who are born here, and the parents are not introducing the African perspective to them. They're completely lost. So there's that break. There's no bridge between the African culture and where they are right now, or where they were born in the Western world. So I'm wanting that, to find that connect.
All right. See, the challenge with most of us coming from Africa is, unfortunately, our culture, who we are as a people, and our culture is massively de-emphasized. And the things that are portrayed to us, given to us, are maximally Western in nature. So we grow up not valuing our culture because the world is telling us our culture is not valuable. In fact, I'll give you a good example and then I'll continue. Here's something I like to ask people. The thing that just happened in Israel recently, where Hamas attacked Israel, we saw the videos and all that. I usually ask people, did you take time to pray for Israel when they were going through the issues they were going through? Have you taken time to identify? Did you take time out of your day to identify with them? They were like, yeah. And then I asked them the same question. When the war was going on in your country, did you take time to pray for your country and your people? The answer is generally no. I'm like, why? That's one big perspective. It's because that culture has been massively emphasized. So them, they have preserved their culture, they have preserved their people, and it's been emphasized in the media, whereas our culture has massively been de-emphasized. So we don't want to identify, they always say that we like to identify with those that are fly,
Mm-hmm.
So our culture is generally not fly. And even though there's so much massacre going on on our continent, no one really cares. In fact, it's been so normalized in media and in the minds of people that people generally think of us Africans as barbarians. So even though that's happening, no one cares. No one is talking about it. And because no one is talking about it, in our minds, we're thinking, well, Africa is Africa. That's just the way things are. And so because of that, that sows deep-seated inferiority complex in our hearts. and that devaluing of human life and devaluing of African culture just makes us not want to have anything to do with the culture. And I think there's even a lot of people from our country and the continent who often say Africa is done. I don't want to have anything to do with Africa. I'll live in this country and do whatever it is I want to do. That's just the mindset people are coming from. So I definitely understand that. But having lived with a lot of families, been in the different spheres of influence, from diplomatic to business to personal, and also as an African who has gone through a lot of the issues you just talked about, I hated my country. I hated my people. I didn't want to have anything to do with them because, first of all, I'm like, what is family? I don't even know what family is. I was massively devalued in my own father's house. I was called a bastard son and thrown out of the house. So why should I care? In my own country, our own president is putting us down. We're not prospering. Everyone is out there, is everyone for themselves, or was supposed to be from the same, if we're from the same community or ethnic group. Okay, maybe I can help you out. So I'm like, why should I care? But coming to someone else's country, trying to live like them and trying to behave like them, trying to learn from them, I realized that honestly, I really can't be like one of them because I'm not part of them. I wasn't born to them, and I have a separate culture. So here's what I discovered, and this is what I'm sharing now for parents with kids, parents from African country with kids that are born here, or people from from the continent who are now here. Here's something that I really discovered about authenticity. If you're not comfortable in your own skin, if you're not comfortable with your gender, your age group, if you're not comfortable with the family you come from and the community you come from, you're already confused because you're already trying to be someone else. Because the minute you're not comfortable with it, you've created a vacuum in your heart and in your mind, and you have to find something, an identity to fill it up with. And usually and when you find an identity, you try to create a story around that identity, which revolves around, I'm a bush faller, or I'm an American, I'm from Los Angeles, I'm from Baltimore, these are my people. And when you do that, you cut yourself off from the motherland, from the struggles of the motherland, the challenges of the motherland, and the potential opportunities we can bring to the motherland. So if you are not comfortable in your own skin, sex, age, or family you come from, community you come from, honestly, you're already confused. And that's because you're already trying to be someone else. So as someone who went through all of that and came and kind of really finally discovered this, I think this is what actually started to set me apart from any other person in the marketplace. So if I went into any field, any sphere of influence, I always stood out because I was that African person who was proud of his heritage, who knew the challenges of his people, who was looking for ways to bring opportunity back to his people, but willing to first of all learn from what was available. That always set me apart.
Yeah. And yeah, it's not a matter of, we're not saying that you're valuing your background, but you're also taking the experience that you're getting here, because you're learning. We're in an environment where the mindset is different too, but you also have opportunities available to you, and you're taking advantage of those opportunities, but not forgetting where you come from. And that's what we're trying to talk about, because even in our community, and I think we're still doing a good job of it in our community, because we still wear our clothes. Like I have my Afrik style clothes on here. You have that on. You still wear that when we have our cultural events. We dress up. We try to mimic, the traditional dances. We still listen to our music. We still eat our food. Like after this, I'm going to cook a traditional Cameroonian dish, eru. I'm gonna make eru and watafufu. So even after living here for 28 years, I still remember the culture. I still remember, the traditional things. So I'm still bringing that African perspective to my Western culture. Yeah, in between, I'm mixing the Western culture in my household. But my kids still have to learn the respect that we grew up with. They still have to learn that family members have to be respected. You have to call your grandmother. You have, like, my dad's birthday was on Monday. And my kids went over there, to respect their grandpa and spend time with him. And, even though I couldn't go, but I made sure that I'm passing that on to them, to know that respect should still be, it's still something that should be inbuilt in them. So I'm passing that legacy on and hoping that it will not get watered down when it gets passed down to my grandkids or my
Yeah.
grandkids. So that's really what we're trying to, to emphasize on. So when you're coaching, you're a life coach. When you're
Mhm.
coaching, I know you coach young men. What demographics are you coaching? What
Well,
demographics is it?
I generally coach young men. Yes, I coach young professionals, business owners who are starting out, people, athletes, and entertainers. Definitely open to coaching youth and young adults if I find that they're teachable, coachable, and they actually want to learn as well. So that's generally why I coach. So I generally want to focus on between 18 to 35 because I think those are people who are growing, trying to come into their own profession, business, purpose, calling. So I try to focus on that, and I try to speak about things, faith, family, and business related. So from a faith perspective, it's generally about purpose. Why are you here on this planet? What has God called you to do? It's a massive adventure. Okay, how can you get you on that journey while you're working, or maybe away from your work if that's necessary? From a family perspective, coming from a broken family, well, it was tough, but I think because of my faith experience and my journey, I was able to bring back what I learned into my family, and my family is now very healed, wholesome. We're united, we're fulfilling our individual destinies and a destiny as a family, and we've been fighting for each other and elevating each other up in business and other aspects of our life. So I try to coach people from that perspective, also from a point of view of communication and conversation, and leadership as well. And then on a business front, because of my background in mergers and acquisitions, strategic communications, fund manager, I help people on the strategic planning, strategic thinking, and then on the leadership and the growth front as well. So I generally like to coach people in this particular perspectives. And then again, demographic wise would be young adults, business owners who are starting out, athletes, entertainers, but I create room to take care of the youth and the young adults for sure.
That's amazing. Let's shout out to a few people. So Mary Lynn Lore, shout out to you. She says, I love the prayer analogy. Learn and earn in cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Blockchain.
I'm not sure who that is. They said, you are so right. Your heritage is a part of your identity. As Africans, we bring so much to this world, so much beauty. And the same person says, I never miss a chance to showcase our beauty. And the same person again says, I think we continue to promote our culture and educate others about who we are and our culture, then we ourselves will grow. So if we continue to promote it, then we ourselves will grow. So it's more comments than anything. Oh, it's Sheila. Sheila, hi. Shout out to Sheila. And then our producer says, very important, especially understanding the role most of them, I mean, most men are assigned in our African settings. So that's something very important, because, we have that issue, like you had talked about it, like men being watered down, men being on the menu and things like that. So I think we've talked a little bit more about that. And as women from an African background, we have to we need to remember that yes, the man is the head of the household, because it's getting to that point where we want to take over the role. It's almost like we're competing with our husbands. Instead of giving that respect, bringing food to the table, honoring your husband, like it says in the Bible, bringing the biblical way of honoring your husband. It's become where, okay, because I earn more money or because I'm earn the same, I have to compete with my spouse. And I know that's a topic for another day. It's really not our topic today, but it feeds into it, because the African perspective in the Western culture, because we watch the movies about divorce, we watch the movies where things like that, or the shows, the shows on TV that kind of influence start coming into our households, and we're trying to practice some of these things. So it's things that we have to talk about in our community, because the amount of divorce out there is, it's rampant. It's the percentage is going up. And so those are some of the things that we have to have these conversations. And I'm really glad that we picked this topic. I know that it's a topic that we cannot finish today. There's definitely no way we can finish that topic today, because it's very loaded.
Massive. It's very
But this
massive. It's
was
a
just
loaded topic for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this was very a preview into it. But talk about, so the other book that you wrote was the God's
Experiment.
Experience
The God
Experiment. So
experiment, the
the,
art of developing your destiny.
yeah, so talk about that one. And I think there's a third book, right?
Yeah, there's a third book. Yeah.
Yeah, so talk about those two books, and
Okay.
and where you came from with the topics, and how they feed into our topic today.
Okay. So the God experiment, the art of developing your destiny, pretty much it's cataloging my story from when I left in Cameroon and then when I left Cameroon to here now. But it just captures the first 4 years of my life. So here was my calling. When I was back home doing very well, and I just shared how that God called me and was sending me to this new country, my instructions were like this: you go do what I tell you to do, you go where I send you to go, you do what I tell you to do. In other words, what God was telling me was, I want you to give up your youth. I want you to give up your life to me. Your life is not going to be as usual. Your life is not going to, find a career, make money, get married. No, your life is going to be dependent. It's going to depend on what I ask you to do, when I ask you to do it, and then you'll go where I'm sending you to go, beginning with America, which is your starting point. And then here was my job. He said, I'm going to engineer circumstances and put you in. You wouldn't have resources, you wouldn't have finances, you wouldn't have the support you need. The only person you'll be able to trust is me. I will take you through this journey. You will see my power. At the end, you'll be my witness. And he said, but throughout this journey, I need you to catalog the things you see, the things you experience, the nuances and the logistics of not just finding your purpose, but actually fulfilling it with my help. So that when you tell other people, they too can fulfill their destinies by following the wisdom, the insights that you glean from this journey. So my life of faith is not one of knowledge or going to church, is one of actually putting my life on the line and walking that life of faith for over 15 years of my life now. So my life hasn't been normal, actually. And so having done through this and experienced God's favor, God's blessings, God's hand, and providence in orchestrating circumstances where I come into different spheres of influence, into different fields. Even though I'm young as I am, I was able to capture those and communicate that in the best possible way so that when people read it, not only would they be impacted with my own little history I've developed with God and also grow in their faith, but they can actually see that God is serious about us fulfilling our purpose. If you think you're ambitious, I'm sorry, God is more ambitious than you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you think you have a goal and a dream, God has a bigger dream than you think you have. And I promise you, if you find out what his dream for you is, you realize you're too small to accomplish it. And you need all the help you can get, from people to resources to favor and to spaces that nobody wants to see you in. And so I was able to, because I've been in these things several times over and over again, I was able to catalog those wisdom pills and divine wisdom so that people can turn them into tactical, actualized advantages to fulfill their purpose in life. Because between finding out what you want to do in life, what God is calling you to do, to actually fulfilling it, in between you have people problems, you have crisis, you have fears, you have concerns, you have spiritual wickedness in heavenly places fighting you to make sure you don't get to it.
Mm-hmm.
You have issues. And so because I've navigated the in-between to find out those nuances and logistics, that's what I'm actually bringing to you. And so how the book is structured is, I share the insight. I share my story to prove to you that I've done it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I find a biblical reference to prove to you that this is not just me pulling from somewhere. And then I share with the wisdom with you, show you how you can do it in any aspect of your life. And so that's how the chapter is divided, from creativity to business and through and through. And so you can read some of my stories in between. And the way I share my story, it's very vulnerable. I share everything. The success, the failures, and the bloopers. Nothing is off limits, because that was the deal I had with God. So that's and this is just book one, and it captures the first 4 years of my life, which incorporated me staying with Auntie Saaghe and doing life with her, some of the challenges that we had, and some of the challenges that she's very familiar with as well. So that is that book. The next book that she wants me to talk about is called Diplomatic Inspiration, and the subtitle is Inspiring Future African Leaders and Shaping Africa's Future. And before I tell you the premise for the book, I want to tell you how it came about, the inspiration. There was a time about 5 years ago when there was coup d'etats all across Africa. Massacre. There was people were killing each other. Africa was in trouble. We were seeing it across the news. It was being normalized. That was the problem for me, because I don't just see my country, Cameroon, as my country. I see Africa as my continent. And I believe we Africans have shared values and beliefs in many ways. So I see the African people as my people. I see Africa as the motherland. So that was concerning to me. At that time, I was going through hard times. I didn't know what to do or where to go. I just was thinking of Africa. I was thinking, what can we do? In fact, at that time, Cameroon had, I think, the issue with the Ambazonia problem, or the political problem in Cameroon had just begun, and it was becoming a problem. Our friends and family members were dying. So it was an issue. I was praying about it, and it was an issue. I remember I had a dream. I had taken a retreat just off the reservation somewhere, just quiet. And I'd been praying about it. And then one night I had a dream. In the dream, there's this white light, and I'm speaking towards this white light, and I'm saying, and I'm praying, I'm like, God, Africa is going through something, through problems. Do something about it. Here's what I heard back from the voice. You do something about it. So I thought to myself, okay, wait a minute. I'm doing something about it. That's why I'm praying about it, so you can do something about it. I heard back. I'm answering your question by asking you, what are you going to do about it? So I said, well, that's confusing. Well, what do you think I can do about it? The voice answered back, well, what do you think you can do about it? So I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, well, I'm broke. I'm going through issues. The only thing I can do right now is write. And the voice said, why don't you start there? And I remember immediately after that little dream that I had, I wrote an article about community and about Africa, and it went viral. So on the premise of this idea, I decided to write this book. So here's the premise for the book. And here's the thinking for the book. If we are going to shape Africa's culture, we need to bring three groups of people together. People who are back home in the motherland, people who are in the diaspora, and people who could effect change. We need to bring those three groups of people. To do that, we need a common vision. And to be able to stir that vision, we need certain leadership, a simple leadership idea that everyone understands and can adhere to. And then lastly, we need to craft a vision that even my grandma in the village can understand. So based on three theories that I have been creating through my master's program, I was able to answer these three questions in the book. And so that's where the idea for the book came from. How can we as Africans, young and future African leaders, come together on a common vision that we can measure? How can we do that with a vision that we can all measure, and in a way that we can understand, to be able to begin affecting people back home and begin to bring change? So that's where that idea came from. And actually, what was cool about that is, immediately after I wrote the book, nothing really happened, but a diplomat picked it up and then invited me to talk about it. And that's how I entered the diplomatic field.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, my friend Sheila wants to connect with you. So that's somebody who she has a nonprofit, Sea Life. She was
is
on
that
my
Sea
show.
Life, Sheila? Oh, hi,
Sea
Sheila.
Life, yes, Sea Life, Sheila. And then we have an event coming up December 9th. I Love Africa. It's a fundraiser. So I will definitely put you two together, because she's doing some work in Africa, and you and her will have some intelligent conversations. That's your kind of person. So that's what the Saaghe Fogwe podcast is all about: connecting people, community, and all that. So as we're rounding up, because I don't want us to make this show too long, right? People will start, falling asleep, and they want to go eat. They want to go, go cook for tomorrow. But we've talked a lot about the African perspective in, bringing it to the Western experience, right? Or the African perspective, bringing it to the Western experience. So as we round up now, talk to everybody who still thinks that we need to kill that African perspective. talk to those people and just reach out to those people, and then kind of tie it all in together here with some final words to, to give us some perspective on this topic, and with a preview to a future show, because I know we'll have to we'll talk about this again, and then also talk to people how they can get in touch with you and your books and get your books.
Well, that's a hot one.
Yeah.
I'll say this. We Africans are a colorful people. I believe that all Africans are leaders. And I believe that the mistake most of our leaders are making is that they are leading Africans as peasants, whereas Africans are born to be leaders. And I believe most of us have giant dreams. We have massive dreams. And most of us have thoughts, ideas that we want to see materialize, but we have issues, fears, concerns that definitely tend to keep us back. But here's something I learned from one of my mentors. If you think you're a giant killer, and if you believe that you're a giant killer, then take giant steps. If you think you're a leader and you think you're called to be great, you're called to be the African lion or lioness that you're called to become in the Western world or for Africa's sake, then I think it's time for you to take giant steps. The truth is, as you've seen and as we've talked about, while the world cares about things that are happening in the Middle East, in the East, in the West, no one really cares about Africa. No one can really fix Africa, only us. It's up to us to do it. And if you're thinking about running away from Africa and thinking there's nothing in Africa, then you need to ask yourself, why is it then that the geopolitical powers of the world are running into Africa and then you're running out of it? If you're running away from Africa, why are they running into it? What is in Africa that they see that you don't? And if they're running to Africa to do whatever it is they want to do with it, take its resources, use it for their purposes, become wealthy and massive in nature, and then you're sitting in your seat with these dreams of greatness and these dreams of transformation for communities in Africa. You're sitting in your seat and just chilling and being quiet, and you choose to be comfortable. And then you're complaining about it. I think that's a little bit of hypocrisy, don't you think? If you're called to be a giant killer, like our brothers and sisters, like those of the Zulu clan or those from the Arum clan, like my grandmother of late, then you need to take giant steps. But I'd like to encourage you with this. So if you're a giant killer, take giant steps. But for you who doesn't believe you can take giant steps because you don't think you're a giant killer, but you have a dream and you feel like there's something we can do for Africa, I want to encourage you with this. What is risk? Risk is just the willingness to be foolish for what you believe in. What is faith? Faith is just actions behind the willingness, just the actions behind your willingness to be foolish for what you believe in. So risk is just a possibility. It's the possibility of something that could happen. Using Auntie Sai's show, for example, the risk is, she'll be wasting her time. The show wouldn't do anything. The show wouldn't affect anything. That's just the risk. But then what was the action behind that risk? She decided to just get up one day, sit up on a podcast and talk. That was just the action. So faith is actually simple, because all faith is just the action, which is a note away, a text message away, a phone call away, an email away, a report away, just sit in your front of your podcast and talk away. That's all faith is. What makes faith hard is the perception of the risk, the fears that you have in your mind that have been amplified. Or it's not going to go where it's supposed to go. It's not going to reach the people it's supposed to reach. But that's only a possibility that hasn't yet happened. But every time you take a step of faith, you make an action towards a God-given goal, an inspired dream, here's what you discover. That life is not full of surprises. It's you who is full of surprises. Because life is just life. Life is living its own life. There's nothing new under the sun. You're the one who's new under the sun. You're living your best life and your first life. And every time you take a step of faith forward, you surprise yourself. Every time you gain a new achievement, you surprise yourself. And not only do you surprise yourself, you create space to influence and impact other people. And when I say other people, I'm talking about our cousins that are coming up, the young ones who are coming up, like my little one who's watching right now, 11 years old, Thomas Njimbong. You create space for him to believe, oh, wait, uncle is in media? Wow, I can be in media too. Oko is in technology? Hey, I can be in technology too. So we not only surprise ourselves, but we show our people what truly is possible. Because that's what I think we lack for the most part as Africans in America and Africans in Africa. We lack new experiences to teach us new things, and we lack exposure to possibilities to show us what is possible. So that's what I'll leave you with, that regardless of where you are in life, the challenges you're facing, just keep pushing, because at the end of the day, life is not full of surprises. It's you. You're the one who's full of surprises every time you take a step of faith. So I'll leave it at
Wow.
that.
When I told you guys that this was a young man with an old soul, was I kidding? I was not. I mean, he has inspired me. This is somebody I talk to all the time, and I'm hearing things come out of his mouth, and I'm looking at him like, is this the same young man that I saw grow up? And he was talking about when I was 21, 22. How old do you guys think he looks? Doesn't he look 16? He looks like he's 16. Talk about when I was 21 or 22. A few people just, they're still commenting. I mean, I see a lot of engagement on this topic. So I think that this was a good topic that we talked about today. We'll talk about it again from different angles. But what I wanted, I know he gave his final word, but I want conversations like this to continue in our community. When we have our conventions, when we have our association reunions, these are some of the conversations we need to start having. When we have retreats, like Pemexans, we'll have a retreat here soon. We're starting that culture. We want to have conversations like this, because we have to start making our minds think about things that we can come together and do, not only gossiping about people, talking behind people's back, bashing people, pulling this person down, painting them black or white or blue or yellow. Instead, having conversations like this so that we can start thinking about constructive things that we can do to build our community as opposed to tearing it down. So on that note, I want to thank every single person who watched today, every single person who's going to share this video, every single person who subscribed to this channel, every single person who even has made a comment, even in passing, or even a prayer about this show. I'm going to thank you guys sincerely. We're in the Thanksgiving season. Thank you all. And until next time, stay blessed. Thank you, Sabah, for being here. I
Thank you, Auntie, for
appreciate
having
you.
me.
You know, I love you. You have a special place in my heart. We'll catch up.
Thank
We'll
you.
have another show to continue this conversation. But thank you, and stay blessed, everybody.